Good evening, everybody. Before we get going, I am going to introduce you to Kathleen Murphy, the Superintendent of Concord School District.
Thank you, David. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're really appreciative of you taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us tonight. It's really been great fun to work with the city, Dave and the rec department, to explore the needs over at Memorial Field. And I know there's some students with us tonight, and I'm sure that they will share their thoughts with us. I see them up in the back. And thanks for being here. I hope you did your homework. Did you get your homework done? Yes, you did. Good. I'm proud of you. But it's great that you're here. I know you're going to hear some reports. Dave and the team that has been doing the investigations with some results, and I hope it's informative. And again, just thanks for being here. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. I'm David Gill, the Parks and Recreation Director. Thank you for coming tonight. I think the students need extra credit and automatic A's for the rest of the semester, so thank you for coming. I'd also like to welcome, I think there's a couple of school board members here, as well as city councilor. The mayor is here too, so thank you for coming. We'll do a quick presentation. We'll do a recap of the meeting we held back in September, and then we'll eventually turn it over to the consultants to talk about all the issues we have and how we can fix them. Just as a recap from the last meeting, this is a great partnership with the city and the school district. This is the first time we've, both the school board and the city council has jointly funded this master plan, so we're walking down this path together, so it's great. We have VHB on contract and Hunter Sports on contract to look at the athletic facilities as we go forward. Just to recap, 1926, Memorial Field started to becoming a park. It's several deeds over the years. Back in 1971, well, a couple of highlights. The first football game in 1945 with portable lights. We're doing that now, so I don't know if that's good or bad. But 1971, if you do the next slide, 1971 we did a master plan. Most of this master plan was started. Right after this, the city started acquiring some lots. The state gave us property, and we also got a land and water conservation grant to begin building out. One thing I think is, can I borrow yours? Which one is it? Interesting to note, there's a parking lot down here where the band field is. There was a domed air bubble, pretty ahead of the game. Over here is a lacrosse field, but the track, baseball, some of the soccer and the football, different orientations, but a lot of it is there. So in 1971, they did a great job of planning ahead. I'm good. I think we all know Memorial Field today. You know, it is, you know, the main sporting location for Concord School District. For the high school, we do have a lot of youth and adult leagues that use it when the high school's not using it. We have cross-country skiing, and it's just an aerial. I think everybody knows what's there. Next slide. It's a good aerial, looks pretty. However, we can see where the water is. The water's up here, so as much as it looks nice and green, it does show what we already know, that there's a drainage problem at Memorial Field.
Thanks, David. Hi, everybody. Thanks. I'm Beth Fenstermacher with the Community Development Department for the city. I'm just introducing, so you don't have to listen to David talk all night. So some of the things that we've done since 1971, it's aging. People born in 71 have already celebrated their 50th birthdays, so Memorial Field is pretty much ready for some upgrades. So some things that we have done is invested almost $800,000 to improve tennis courts, press box, and then doing some engineering studies to understand what the issues are out there and that need to be fixed. understanding through those studies that a lot more has to happen to bring this up to current standards. So that's why we're doing this master plan, to start planning out what we can do and what we need to pay for to do. So drainage, as David mentioned, is one of the biggest issues that we have out there. There's a lot of standing water, which makes the fields unusable. We've done some investigations just to look at the underground drainage, and there's clogged, they're blocked, they've been there for 50 years, so it's time to upgrade those to help address those issues. Next slide. Yep, so just looking at the 1971 expansion, and you can see this depression here, that's where those pipes are, and they're starting to collapse. So it's causing not only drainage issues, but trip hazards and other issues with the fields. So so pretty much we've started, staff went through our understanding of what the issues are out there. The 1970s complex did not anticipate the needs of sports today. So that's one of the things that we're trying to upgrade to bring them up to regulation and to host different types of events that can currently happen there. When the track is used for track meets, you can't have other games happening at the same time, so it's schedule conflicts. The track needs to be replaced, the bleachers need to be replaced. There's been talks about whether or not to make it an artificial turf field versus grass fields. There's parking challenges, there's accessibility challenges. So there's a lot of things that we need to address. So, next slide. In September, we had our first listening session, and here's just a breakdown of what we heard from the community that night, and pretty much everything overlaps with what we thought some of the issues were, which is good. We're on the same page. So the things that we're focusing on as we moved forward with the concept plans that you'll see tonight were addressing those drainage issues, addressing parking, getting better lights out there that work, accessibility, bleachers, replacing the track, adding locker rooms and updated bathrooms, moving the fields outside the track for concurrent use, turf fields. We did not reach a consensus on that at the last meeting, so it's still out there as an option. And then adding walking trails and cross-country ski trails. So this is not only from the public meeting that we had, but also there was focus groups that were hosted with high school students and middle school students. So I'm gonna now pass it over to our consultants from VHB. We have Eric Girard here tonight, and he will bring you through their study.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, David. My name is Eric Girard. I'm a civil engineer with VHB. And we've been working on this project essentially since July of 2023 to start our initial investigations to understand, really dig in and understand what's going on at Memorial Field. So we started with an existing conditions site survey, understanding property bounds, knowing where the site limitations are, moving into identifying the wetland resources, identifying what those constraints will be, where we can or cannot expand or do work. Similarly, there's buffer zones and regulatory requirements associated with those areas. Additionally, we engaged a geotechnical engineer to do borings to understand the soils, subsurface soils, and groundwater. Those results came back, very elevated levels of groundwater, 2-3 feet below the ground surface, which is why you're experiencing all these drainage issues out there. Additionally, topography, understanding the slope of the land and what we can and cannot do out there when looking at future development opportunities. And I'd like to turn it over to Chris now to run through the development programs.
Thanks, Eric. Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Huntress. I'm with Huntress Sports. We're landscape architects and planners. We specialize in the design and construction of recreation and athletic facilities. So we were here for the listening session, and before I present the drawings that we're going to look over, this being one of them, I just want everyone to remember we're at the master plan level. What we're trying to show tonight and in the plans that we've developed to date are really what's possible. What's possible, have we thought of everything? Some things that we're going to show I think work quite well. Some things may need some additional thought. But what I want to take you through first is you have that laser pointer, is what we called Concept One, development program. When we were here last time, we heard quite clearly that an 8-lane, 400-meter track would be desired, that the field within that track should be wide enough to accommodate multiple sports, not just football, but widen it out for a full-size soccer field, which once I get to soccer in width at 75 yards, I can accommodate lacrosse, field hockey, every other sport within that dimension. That the seating could come down on the track and field, and things like a second field that would be developed that wouldn't be within the track. So let me walk you through this program a little bit here. What this plan shows, this is South Fruit Street up here. This is your existing parking. We've expanded the existing parking to move kind of westerly down towards the track, to put a bus drop-off down in this area, and we've continued a new access road up and around this slope that would come out opposite Industrial Drive up here to try and improve some of the parking and circulation that you've got up there right now. This secondary entrance that we have here and exit is off-centered from the center line of Industrial Drive, and I think doesn't allow this parking lot to be as efficient as it could be. So we wanted to see if we could improve circulation and expand some of the parking. This new lot accommodates 57 more parking spaces than we have now. And again, we take this access drive and put it on the same center line with Industrial Drive down here. That allows for bus drop-off and pickup here, and also bus parking right up in this area too, so that when there are major events with multiple sports and multiple teams, that there are places for them to go. Moving down and looking at the track and field, this plan shows a 8-lane, 400-meter track with straights on both sides. So there'd be sprinting straights on the home side here and sprinting straights also on the far side. The field within the body of the track itself is as wide as it could be. It's 75 yards for soccer and full 360 feet or 120 yards in length. The seating that's shown here has been brought down to about 750 seats with a full press box. This would all have sports lighting and speaker system, sound system, and the like. We have tried with this plan to expand this track and field within its current footprint for the most part, and trying to respect some of the existing improvements and investments that you've made in things like the tennis courts and the surrounding fields throughout this area. So from a grading perspective, it works, and I'm very comfortable that we could get this 8-lane track in here with a wider field. The other desire that we had, or were asked to accommodate, would be a new field house building. And that's what this kind of orange block is here, is a 5,000 square foot building which would accommodate concessions, bathrooms, storage, maintenance areas, and be a significantly larger building than what you have now, and be in what I consider to be kind of the central area of the park itself and here, so that it would serve not just the track and field, but all the baseball and all the surrounding facilities that come around behind that. Let me see if I've left anything off here. I think on top of all this, as we did this design, we looked at things like ADA accessibility for handicapped individuals, and working with Eric and his team, drainage improvements and grading, and how it would blend into the site. So I'm very comfortable with the plan and with the program we've got, that we can make that work. We do have extra parking. Thank you, Dave. One of the other things we looked at was the possibility of expanding parking, understanding that parking on this site is tight. And as we saw in the original plan, there was a parking lot in this area. We're showing reinforced grass parking over here, which would remain a grass field. It would be used by the marching band and could be used really by anybody as a grass surface, but could also accommodate about 100 cars when there was an overflow or a need for it. That would roughly be within this area and stay off the baseball field as well. So the access to that would be off of this new loop drive that would come in, and you'd come down here and into that location. I think the next slide is going to be yours, Eric. Did I do the wrong one? Oh, there we go.
Thank you. In looking at this Phase 1 program and understanding drainage and playability on these fields is a major concern. During these wet times, a lot of the fields become unusable or just not very good to play on and unsafe. So as we're looking at how do we improve the drainage out there, essentially with the groundwater so high, it really needs, those areas need to be lifted in grade. So we're looking at raising the grades up about 2 to 3 feet in those lower fields. That will allow us to get in a proper drainage system, under drains, connecting throughout. Those are those blue lines you see up there. Just a conceptual idea of where we'd be collecting some low points and ultimately draining out. There's the blue dot on the bottom here. There's a collapsed culvert out there today, so part of these improvements would be fixing that large culvert. It's on the state property, but we believe that that area is also causing some of the flooding during the larger storm events. The water just has nowhere to go. It's getting blocked by that. So opening that up will help, and then raising these grades allows us to get in drainage as well as properly sloping the grade to also surface drain as well.
So this image shows, it's an illustrative rendering of what the new track and field could look like, situated, as we showed it on that original plan, but this, as we had said, does accommodate the full-size soccer field, blends into the area of the parking lot as the parking lot expands kind of towards the track a little bit, and then respects the location of the tennis courts and works around it. The bleachers have been reduced in size to 750 seats approximately. Part of that is based on some feedback that we got last time about how many seats do we really need. But the other part is the reality of when we start to expand this track and field program, not impinging upon the tennis courts and the surrounding facilities. So the size, we cannot accommodate a 2,000 seat bleacher here the way you had presently. So we've brought this down to a size that best fit and I think would serve most often the needs, understanding there would be certain events that would be a little bit larger. Phase 2. Before I show the next one, the next slide is, if you recall when we started this, I said some of these plans we have to do really to see what fits and make sure we don't leave any stone unturned. And I offer that as a prelude, if you will, to the next slide. So this slide starts to look at some of the questions. Do you have that? Thank you. Some of the discussion about, so everything you see in Phase 1 that we talked about is accommodated here in this Phase 2 plan. The track and field, same size, the grandstands are the same size. Really what we've done is we took to heart the comment of, can we get a field that's not within the track and field, so that you could separate some of the sports and some of the opportunities for play and accommodate a larger grandstand. And really, and we did about 6 different versions of this plan to try and fit what would work. The only place that the opportunity exists to do that is in the center of the site here, just to the west of the existing building, which is the location of your tennis courts. So we wanted to see what fit and what was possible here. So this shows a full-size multi-purpose field that would, again, be large enough for any high school sport or even collegiate sport, full 75 yards across, 120 yards in length, with runoff areas and team areas, and a full 2,000-seat bleacher and press box here. This would be in close proximity, again, to the new field house building, and really become the centerpiece of this facility, and would be likely eligible for hosting major events, statewide events, certainly citywide events, but major events at a state level as well. As we start to look at how the other improvements then blend into the rest of the park, the baseball field could be renovated in place with new bleachers in the back. We have pulled the baseline in a little bit. You've got a rather large baseball field down there, particularly around the infield, so we pulled the infield in a little bit towards the bleachers. And then we've pulled the right and left field foul lines in, because right now they're longer than they need to be, and expanded center field a little bit, so that you've got now a traditionally sized baseball field in that same footprint that you had before, and that would be improved. As we kind of head west and south here, the existing softball field would be renovated in place. The outfield fence would be brought back a little bit, but still accommodating 225 feet down the foul line on either side for a full-size regulation softball field here. And then tennis and basketball, that program that was here has been relocated down into the lower areas. The remaining fields that kind of walk along the western edge of the property line here would see drainage improvements and grading improvements to help some of that water and wetness down in those fields, and Eric can certainly take you through that. A couple of things that we worked on with VHB and Eric's team were the fact that by placing a field here and really a new tennis courts here, it gives us the opportunity to regrade that, lift that, and potentially put stormwater and drainage improvements under those fields that then have the benefit or that then benefit the balance of the site as well. Because there are only so many ways that we can deal with water on this site given the outfall and the high groundwater. So there are opportunities to put stormwater detention and storage under some of these new improvements. I think the next slide is for you.
Yeah, and this is very similar to the previous. Similar, raising those lower grades to 2 to 3 feet, the drainage improvements, and as Chris had mentioned, there's definitely more of an opportunity where we can start looking for more subsurface detention, even potential infiltration opportunities if we can keep it pretty shallow, which will overall help the playability of the lower fields and adequately get that water away. But overall, similar improvements as you saw before. Same with the parking area, complying with the regulations to detain and treat the water that will have to go through the state permitting process. So yeah, very similar, and yeah, next slide.
And this slide, very similar to the last one. The only real difference here is that where the tennis courts were before, you can now see how the athletic field would be situated here. And this is you can start to get a glimpse of the new field house building up here as well at a gateway. As it would come in off the parking in your arrival, you'd be brought right into kind of that centerpiece of the new facility. And with that, we will open it up for discussion and questions. Okay.
Are these on?
I will let Beth and Dave call on folks, and Eric and I will answer the questions. What's that?
That's okay.
I know, it keeps rolling down.
I'll pass it back to him. For the 2,000 person bleachers on the new turf field that's not near the track, does it make sense to put the press box on the other side so the noise goes away from the neighborhood and it would be heading out towards Langley, or is that not a concern? Or does it not fit?
I'm sorry, you just want to move the press box or the whole bleacher?
Well, I guess however the sound system would be, so that it would be going towards kind of that farmland. Yep. I don't live on that side. It doesn't bother me, but I don't know if it bothers the neighborhood with the sound coming out.
So it's a great question. Certainly the sound system is going to make some noise, regardless of all the things that we can do to it. But we can angle those speakers. Where the control happens, whether the press box is on the east side or the west side, probably is not as much an impact as how we angle those speakers and how many of those speakers we turn on at a time. A facility like this, the multi-purpose field in the middle, would probably have anywhere between 8 and 12 speakers oriented around the field in different areas. We could turn on one side and not the other, or we could turn on half of them. We could also put an upset limit on the volume so that if somebody's in there controlling it, they can't get over a certain decibel level. So those are all control things that we could build into a sound system as we go forward. You're welcome.
Leaving that slide just the way it is, if you look at the tennis courts and basketball courts, if you come directly down from those, have you been able to identify whether or not there is space for a driveway or entryway that comes in off of Clinton Street into the state property that used to be the state police property, and comes right into just about where those, right there. It comes right in through there. I was told many years ago by John Keach there's 30 acres out there, and he was going to use that space for a, I'm going to call it a backdoor driveway, and they were going to be able to come in off Clinton Street to the softball fields at the time. But if you're going to put the basketball courts and the tennis courts there and make people walk all the way, well, it's not that far, but all the way in from Fruit Street, you might want to examine whether or not there's a right-of-way or a trade-off between the state and the school district where you could get a driveway to come right into those basketball courts and tennis courts.
It's a great question. We actually talked about this in one of our project meetings, so I'm going to have Eric address that.
Yes, thank you. So it did come up in one of our discussions, and with it being not on the city property, we didn't evaluate it fully. With the property line down there where Chris is showing, additionally, crossing that area is going to pose challenges with wetlands and the drainage out there. That field is really low as well. So as far as looking at land swaps, we have not gotten to that point or entertained that in this general area here for new driveway access.
For concept 1 and concept 2, is there a price involved yet that you guys have come up with for everybody to know what it would be?
Not sure where Dave ran off to, but there he is. We're working a range of magnitude costs right now because these plans are still in flux. I can offer that when we look at, well, phase 1, let me see if I can get to phase 1. Phase 1 improvements, a project of this scope and size, including a building of that scale and parking lot improvements, drainage improvements, would be in the range of $10 million plus or minus on either side. Individual pieces of that would certainly be less, and how much of this first phase you want to bite off would certainly be up to the city and the school district as we move forward.
How much is concept 2 going to cost? Concept 1, my bad.
Concept 1. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
How much will this one cost? 10 million?
No, phase 1 would be in the range of 10 million. A project of this scale and size, we're still working out the range of magnitude. A lot of decisions have to be made with regard to surfacing and drainage and other things, but the range is anywhere from 10 million for phase 1 up to for a full build out somewhere north of $20 million if you did everything all at one time.
Do you think that the facilities will be able to host major events such as things like Meet of Champions or New England's for track meets?
I do. The track and field could certainly host, with 8 lanes and double straights, you could certainly host even national events and Olympic qualifiers on a track of that size. And with 2,000 seats on the main field, you could accommodate larger regional events as well.
Do you think there's enough parking?
It's an excellent question. Do we have a overall parking slide, that regional? Okay.
And then last question, do you think that there would be enough revenue from larger meets and other events in order to sustain the facilities?
Great questions. I'll tackle the parking discussion. So the existing parking lot up there today has about 125 spaces. We're adding another 57 or so, and then an additional 100 is the overflow. So during peak events, I think everyone knows it's underparked. We're adding what we can, still understanding that during these peak events, there's still probably going to be, a couple hundred spaces short. There is an additional 130 or so parallel parking spaces on Fruit Street, and then even, overflow on certain times in the state properties. There's another, 150 or so spaces in close proximity. I'm not sure what agreements are in place there, but yes, during major events, I think what you're talking about, there would want to be discussions of satellite parking and how to get people back and forth. As far as the revenue question, David, I don't know if, I think that's a bigger discussion. We have not gotten into that as far as what the fields will generate or potential to generate. I think that's a city question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you made any thought about field events on the inside of the track? Because I know you can't do it on a turf field.
We have. The existing shot put facility would stay in this location over here. Javelin and discus would be thrown down here. Right now, I believe you throw javelin over here, so that could certainly stay. Discus would be located here outside and be able to throw here. And regardless of whether the surface inside the track is turf or natural grass, we would recommend that you get your major throwing events outside of the track because it's just a safer condition.
What about, where are you guys thinking the long jump and triple jump pits are? How many? Also pole vault.
So long jump, triple jump, high jump, and pole vault would be in what we call the D areas, which are these areas within the oval, the track here, on either end. And we've got a more detailed plan that shows them, but high jump and pole vault would be together on one end, and then we'd have two long jump runways and landing pits on the other end.
Just wondering if part of the plan includes new locker rooms or team rooms incorporated either underneath the bleachers or in the new field house?
Yeah, those would be located in the new field house here at 5,000 square feet. That's a pretty healthy sized building, and it does accommodate multiple locker rooms and bathrooms.
First of all, I kind of just want to say for the school board members and everyone listening that this is an extremely important project to not just the students, but the coaches and even all citizens part of Concord. So we really appreciate you guys taking the time to put this all together to keep everyone informed. But for questions, kind of like what that gentleman said, we hope that those tennis courts are easily accessible to everybody. I hope, do you have a plan for that? Because moving it that far could be an issue for a lot of people that use, especially Concord citizens that use those tennis courts daily. So.
We would certainly be connecting pathways and walkways, not only down to the tennis courts, but looping all the way around and making a full circumnavigation, if you will, around the park. And we're continuing to look at other options for parking and access to those tennis courts with the city and with the school system as we go forward.
Thank you.
Can you clarify what's in what phase? You've used the phrase phase one a lot, but haven't explained what's in it.
And that's what we're going to get back to. This is a master plan. And really from our perspective as a design team, we started looking at it and calling it phases. So those are my words, not necessarily the city. So I apologize for that. But let me go back to what is phase one. So the written description of everything that's in this first phase or this first concept is here, but you can see it graphically on the plan. I would expect that the parking lot improvements would occur. The reconfiguration of the track and field along with the 750-seat bleacher would occur here, and the field house and walkway connections, kind of gateway walkway connections. it was important to us as we were starting to lay this out that we recognize that whatever investment you made early on would not have to be undone as you did a later phase, so that you could make these improvements, you could start the drainage improvements throughout these areas, and then tie into them as we get into the later phases. So everything you see on this drawing is what I'm calling phase one, understanding that you can choose to do more or less in what might be your first phase as we go forward. But this we could fit in and comfortably know that we could leave the tennis courts in place here, we could leave the basketball courts in place, and we could still accommodate that first part of the program. Phase two, or what I'm calling phase two, would then be inserted around that. So, you can see where the new field drops in, but these walkways and the building locations, all this, come right up to it from a grading perspective. We know that this works and that we can do this. So what's in phase two? Phase two is, again, it's everything here. And when I say multi-purpose field here and these sports that are under it, that would be on this second field right here. But what's included in this phase would be this multi-purpose field, 2,000-seat bleacher, reconstruction of your existing baseball with new bleachers and press box, softball, tennis, and then all the drainage improvements across the lower fields.
I would just like to add that, about like throwers. So everything you described is where we already do our throwing events. And I just want to add that it's difficult to have throwing events not really in the same space as the track is, because if you're a multi-event person, it's really hard to manage all of your events when you're not close to the field because you can't hear. It's just kind of difficult. So I don't know if you could manage putting something inside the field or maybe making it so it's like a designated area for it and you're not just throwing in some grass.
It's a great comment, and we deal with that quite a bit. I had said earlier that I like to get throwing events out of the inside of the track, understanding that most of the athletes and coaches who do it want to be inside the track because it's easier and more convenient for them. The reason that I like to get the throwing events outside of the infield is just from a safety perspective. At the high school level, you've got kids that are learning these events for the first time, and they may not be quite as accurate as they're going to be later in their career. So for those reasons, we tend to like to get them outside. Having said that, it makes all the sense in the world to get your throwing events coordinated in one location because it's often the same kids, same coaches, so you don't want them having to run to opposite sides. So we'll take a look at that as we go forward and see if there aren't ways to, maybe relocate this shot put and see if we can't centralize some things down in this area where I need the larger grass fields for discus, javelin, and those events, and I could probably find a way to bring shot put down in that location as well. I'm sorry?
I just wanted to add, that was where I was going to start, is segregating the shot put is the worst idea in the world up in that area. So bringing them down together, bringing them where the throwing points are more towards the starting area, because what you not only have is athletes, I believe everything should be out, as you said, but I would congregate most of the start points around where the start of the track or the end of the track is, only because you have the same thing with coaches. If the throwers are removed, even behind something, they can't watch, they can't judge, they can't get to them. Access is really, really nasty right now. So I would concur with you. I've done about 8 different drawings to try to configure those things together. I'm happy to show you some of those because I have been working on some of those concepts to bring that based on what I've heard from both the athletes and the coaches. Second, given your two-field configuration, how difficult would it be to make one of those 2 fields turf, given the drainage issues and other things that you have? Is that feasible, or is bringing turf, does that, because of the water level and the footers that you have to put into, artificial turf fields, does that make that very, very difficult?
I'll take both those questions one at a time, but and first of all, I always appreciate help in the drawing, so I'm happy to have anybody share their thoughts and issues with us. I look, my eyes go right here when I start thinking about where the other field events, throwing events may want to be. Understanding it is behind the bleacher, but I've got a practice soccer field here that I need to try and respect. I've got a softball foul line that comes down in this area that, and that's just the foul line, never mind the area for spectators. So we have to try and be respectful of some of that. But yeah, I think it makes sense to take shot put out of here, potentially bring it down. We've got locations in around the end of the track here and down in here that we can take a better look at. Your question about turf, which surface you choose, which athletic surface you choose on these fields is up to you. It's no more difficult to do natural grass than synthetic turf on any one of these surfaces, and actually turf, from a drainage perspective, synthetic turf, we can use that subbase of that system to actually store stormwater and improve drainage and athletic fields that surround the facility. We will improve the drainage and conditions of these fields down here if we put subsurface drainage under one of these fields, either under this field or under this field or under both. So the surface material is up to you and could be either.
I am wondering about the storage situation at the track. As of right now, we have a handful of wooden sheds, and at least for the track program, it's not quite enough storage space to the point where we have to bring our high jump mats back to the high school and keep them in the building here over the winter. Where the track runs right now, it goes right over where the shed currently exists. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be any built-in storage underneath the bleachers maybe, or new sheds developed.
Excellent question. So yes, and we can use underneath the bleachers, but likely we would wind up putting a track and field storage building down in this location. I tend to like to have them on the end of the straightaway and say put high jump down in this area, because you don't want those mats to have to travel too far, because they're pretty difficult, they're pretty heavy. But we can show, and we'll show on the next version, a track and field storage building probably somewhere in this area that would accommodate all the hurdles, all the pads for high jump, and then all the throwing equipment as well. So we should be able to get that right down in here. And I do like to have the apron of it coming right down off the track so that we can just open, well, you probably would stop the fence on either side and have the building open right to the track, so you could just lift the garage door and get everything right in off the track.
Sorry, one additional. Would that shed be large enough to store the pole vault mats in addition to the high jump mats? The pole vault mats are significantly larger.
Yep.
I'd like to put just my 2 cents in for the grass instead of false turf. I just understand it's much safer for the students to be playing on.
I couldn't see who was speaking. Can you wave your hand just so I can see it? There you are. Excellent comment. It's a community decision. There are benefits and pros and cons on both sides of it, and we certainly understand the emotions between each. We design both natural grass and synthetic turf fields, so when the community makes a decision and wants help trying to understand what those options are, we can certainly weigh in and help you make that decision. But excellent comment.
I'm not sure if you've said it already, but I just wanted to know what the level of priority was for this.
I'm sorry, what the level priority is?
Yes. Do you have a completion date when you're trying to get it done by?
Oh, for schedule. I would defer to the city for questions on schedule.
That's a great question. I'll answer it real quickly. This is the master planning phase, and a couple more slides after we've answered questions. The next question, VHB will go back, make some tweaks based on everybody's comments, and then we have to go back to the Concord School Board and the City Council to let them see the plan and make sure they're comfortable with a little bit more information on pricing and get their direction of where we should go next. The next stage, whatever concept we approve, is design and permitting. So we have a long way to go before we get to construction. It's probably a couple of years away before we begin it, unfortunately.
Two comments. One, if you've ever walked or run on the track, personally, I run on it on a regular basis. It's dangerous, and this needs to be done. It needs to be done as soon as possible, at least the track portion of it. And the turf issue is a fallacy. There's no increased incidence of injuries for turf in high school athletes, based on research. Professional athletes, NFL, yes. That's high level, but there's no statistical increase injuries for turf in high school athletes.
This phase 2, concept 2 looks amazing. It looks like it could be a regional or like a broader New Hampshire regional draw for sports to come in. And the question of cost, are there similar projects in other communities where there can be studies about how amount of money you can bring in to help pay for this over the years versus what goes invested by the community? It's an open-ended question, but I love the idea of this central athletic facility for all kinds of sports, greater Concord and beyond. And the price tag is going to freak people out. So can we quantify or kind of estimate what over the years money could be brought in by people paying to use these facilities?
Sure, and I'm sure as we go forward, we'll work with the city and with the school district on those. I will tell you that based on the program I've seen already with your own athletics in the city of Concord, you're going to use most of the hours that you want or need here. But are there revenue opportunities with facilities like this? Absolutely. There would be a strong desire to rent facilities like this. And it really becomes a decision for the community to make is how late at night they want these facilities to go and what type of use they want to see, because they would get a lot of wear at the same time and whether that return is worth it. So, but an excellent comment and something that we'll look at and continue to look at as we go forward with the city.
I'm not sure if there's a ratio or some sort of rule when it comes to parking for this, or if it's just an arbitrary number that the city can decide. But is there an estimated number for how many parking spaces will be reserved for handicapped individuals?
So ADA requires that 2% of all parking be dedicated for ADA, and that they be the closest spaces to the facility. So right now, we're showing about a dozen spaces in through here, which is more than 2% of what's on site, understanding that in a busy day, we're going to be parking across the street and using other facilities that are further away. So if this turns out, as we advance the master plan and this turns out not to be enough for ADA accessibility, we'll continue to expand that and make sure that we've included sufficient parking and access. There's a woman in the front here who had a question. I'm just going to give her my mic.
So in thinking of our throwers and the turf discussion, it would make sense to have the field in the track be a grass field. Hosting large invitational meets, oftentimes the throwing events happen ahead of the running events. And if you have a grass field and you have a championship meet and 1,000 people come to watch, you can have discus thrown in the infield, and then you can have javelin thrown. Lots of times, meet of champs, is that still done that way? Where's Hayden? So that gives flexibility. There's also an existing shot put circle at the top of the straightaway. I think it's probably under 3 feet of muck. Years ago, no, but that's what's there now. Go to the other end of the track, keep going that other way, down where you want to put the shed. There's already keep going, there you go. Right there is a shot put. There's a circle still there, I think. So yeah, that's where it was thrown until the new one was built in the mid-'80s. So just as a track and field coach and expert, it would make sense to put a grass field in there just because you have the flexibility to put your throwing events inside the track and it doesn't become a safety issue. And And then I had one more thing, which now I don't remember. Oh, the green next to the parking lot, what is that?
That's existing grass area, that's the existing slope.
So would you leave that grass, or would that be parking?
Under this plan, we've left that grass because the slope as it comes down there is a little too steep to park on.
Right.
But we can continue to look at opportunities.
Okay.
Landscape architect, I like to leave it for you.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah. All right, that's it. Thanks.
I'm just going to touch quickly on the issue of major events versus everyday practice. We could certainly set this track up so that we could have a javelin runway, probably in this location down here, and discus on the infield here so that you could throw, should you have a state meet or something. You really do want those events in the area where spectators can see them and not behind for major events. So we could do that for those major events. The everyday throwing is probably what I'd like to see outside of the track and field for safety reasons.
Hi. I was curious if there's a space, or has there been any discussion of maybe a dog area? I know that as a frequenter of Memorial Field, there are plenty of dogs that come to events. A lot of the people who are traveling many hours bring their dogs to the events. And while they're all leashed, it might be nice to have a specific relief area, since nobody wants to walk out with brown shoes.
I'll give a quick answer and then I'll defer to the city on that. So we've designed many a dog park, and it's a good idea. Having said that, we have not so far been asked to include a dog park as part of the scope here, but I would defer to the city as to whether that's a priority for them moving forward.
I think it's definitely something.
Hi, I have a comment and a question. Just to thank the city for taking this seriously enough to bring in both agencies to come up with these development program concepts, greatly appreciate. And for basically everyone in this room, the athletes, the coaches, they're not even going to benefit from this project, but are here showing how important this is. This isn't just for the athletes, it's not just for the school, it's for the city. It's a public park, and to be utilized still as that is very important to the city, and this becoming a focal point. My question is, in my simple mind, I'm looking at the renditions, and if they're built to scale, does every field come with its own scoreboard, its own area for foul balls, overkicked soccer balls, that we can have two sports going on at the same time? I'm thinking if one is a field hockey field, we're going to get nailed with softballs. The softball players are going to get whacked with field hockey balls. Or is it further than I'm looking at? And one of the renditions you have, it looked like the cement piece from the stands abutted the soccer field. Is that for real?
Talking about down here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a rendering. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right, good eye. That's too close. This is, again, this is an artist version of that. We'd wind up probably relocating this stair and pulling that corner back off of here so that we wouldn't be that tight, but that's an excellent question.
And there are sports that are dictated by the surface, that being field hockey. Enough with the grass field, with field hockey. That was a 1972 sport thing, but the sport has evolved. It's a lot quicker, and it's more accurate, and it's actually more safe to be played on a turf field. So turf is a necessity, and I think if you talk about other sports, it's nice to have, but field hockey, it's a necessity. So just don't forget about the field hockey players and the field, because right now we're completely off-site, and I would love to see us brought on-site to be played with our other school sports.
Thank you. Your comments are well taken. Field hockey is the one sport that really does benefit by turf. They all benefit from some extent to turf, but field hockey more so than others, just because of the way the game is played. So we've designed field hockey fields that are used, all the way from the national level down to secondary school use. Both of these fields could accommodate field hockey. If you choose to make one of them turf, that would be a better location for field hockey, but both of them certainly can accommodate the fields. The question about the overlap or some of the areas, particularly here with softball, as it plays towards this multi-purpose field, this is a full 225-foot radius, so range for softball can be anywhere from about 190 out to 225. We've shown this with as large a foul line or home run line as is available, but understanding space is tight. So there will be some times when a really well-hit ball from softball could get out and into this field, but we would have safety netting along the back end of the multi-purpose field that would limit that ability as well and protect those players. You're welcome.
Any more questions?
I don't know if there's anyone here that can speak to this, but piggybacking on the point of the teams that are currently completely off-site, so at Runlet, at Rollins, across Fruit Street at the State Hospital Complex, is there a thought that this would increase capacity so that some of those teams could be brought on site here?
You're talking about all sports across the board?
I'm just wondering about increased capacity, especially if our fields at Runlet are potentially going away in the near future.
I think the good thing about a turf field, it does add capacity. So, right now, the turf field could be open. We didn't have much of a winter. So when you look at Runlet sports, a lot of times high school teams are practicing on that backfield, and that's almost as hard as cement. So depending on what happens, if the school district builds more fields for the new middle school over in broken ground, that's one option. But if a turf field is here, we'll definitely be able to add capacity. It's just up to the community how we want to use that extra capacity.
Yeah, just to add to what David said, the turf adds capacity. So one of the reasons we don't practice much at Memorial Field, because those are game field only to maintain the quality of them because they're natural turf. So when you add artificial turf, there's no reason you can't practice on them and play a game right after.
This is less of a question and more of a statement to the town. The upgrades that I see now meant enough for me to come tonight after graduating in 2018, and piggyback off of the nice lady that said some really nice things earlier. It's not going to affect me, but I moved back to Concord, and I still continue to go to Memorial Field because it reminds me of having a lot of fun back when I was growing up, being a part of a team with the camaraderie and just making new friendships and relationships. Thank you.
Hi, just a quick question. Under the renovation for the baseball field, is there any consideration about that being turf as well? Because obviously baseball is played in the spring, but it does unlock additional capacity for other sports in the fall to leverage it as well.
I'm happy to answer that, but at this point in our discussion, we have not focused on a surface selection for any of the fields, but particularly baseball, we haven't had that discussion. Doesn't mean that we can't continue to ask the question as we wrap up the master plan and think about what surfaces might be most suitable, but to date, we haven't had that discussion, no.
Just kind of putting in, the students' opinion on the turf field. I think we are always put at a severe disadvantage to those D1 teams that can get on that field in this winter, early spring, and start practicing way before us when we still are inside because there's snow. Well, definitely not this year, but when there's snow on those fields. And I think turf, sure, there might be some injury disadvantages to that, but as someone said, we're not playing at the collegiate level. We're not in the NFL. That's not really going to apply to us. I think a turf field is definitely necessary, at least one, but also a good grass field as well, just to kind of give us that advantage that a lot of other teams have. So.
I just wanted, since I've heard the discussion, the comment a couple of times tonight about injury rates on turf. And again, we do synthetic turf, we do natural grass, we've done them both, but not every turf is the same. And we've designed turf fields for the NFL, and we've designed natural grass fields for the NFL as well. NFL fields are very, very different than anything that we would ever consider designing for a high school level sport. And also all of those studies, which probably go back about 20 years or 25 years, that compare synthetic turf injury rates to natural grass, they're not comparing and this is no knock on Memorial Field, they're not comparing your fields against synthetic turf. They're comparing D1 level soccer fields that might see 30 events a year against synthetic turf. I can guarantee you that a well-maintained synthetic turf field would be safer for your high school athletes than the present fields that you have at Memorial. Like turf or don't like turf, that is the reality of turf. It would be safer here, and I'm happy to talk with anybody about that later if they'd like to.
Thank you. My comment first is that, again, for community members, I actually am part of the Summer Softball League for adults. So it is also important to a lot of the community members here, not just student athletes. And I see a lot of other community members in Memorial a lot. Question though is when this project does get off, because it is something that we do need, will there be any issues or implications for in and off season sports with working on the development of each separate field? Will that be something that like football has to kind of take a back seat and move somewhere else, or will we plan it so that way we are not impacting those in-season sports?
So a lot of that will depend on how the city decides to eventually phase this and what other fields are available at one time. I will tell you, as I've said in meetings, probably with the city, there's a certain amount of pain that comes with building new fields, and that pain is suffered by sports who we have to relocate on occasion. It's just the reality. We will have to impact your facilities while we build new, but hopefully we can phase it in such a way that the impact is minimal, particularly to those in-season sports as well.
And that's an important question. Depending on what phase, depending on what field, some of them are going to be offline for a year. So we will have to prior proper planning. If we move forward with the school district and the city and the funding's there, we're also going to have to lean on our neighboring towns. We're going to have to look at the parks. How do we accommodate that little bit of pain? How do we continue to get the programs, your guys' programs going as well as the community ones? So great question.
I'm definitely on board with, whoa, this is pretty loud. With what I see here, I like it a lot. My question is, if we get maybe one turf field, we might be lucky, but most of that complex is still gonna be natural grass. Is irrigation any part of that? Like underneath sprinklers that are automated, so I don't have to pull a water cannon around every day?
We always recommend irrigation on all the athletic fields, in-ground irrigation system with multiple zones. So yeah, that would be our recommendation.
However, for Justin, we're not going to put it in.
Hi, I kind of a two-part question, and it was to double on the dog park comment earlier. There is currently the dog park across the river, and that's the only dog park I know of that's fully fenced in the city. So a lot of residents on this side of the river would love to have a park that we could go to that is fully fenced in, and let our dogs be off leash and not worry about them running off. And then also the new development field that was planning on happening over in that park currently. I remember hearing something about athletic field that was going to be going in over there, and how is that field going to be incorporated in any kind of phasing or field availability with this project?
Both great questions. I'm going to pick on the chair of the Recreation and Park Advisory Board. She is here, so she'll be able to bring back the dog question to the committee. As we move forward, if both the school district and the city council say yes to the next stage, there is a fully designed and permitted high school regulation athletic field at Terrell Park. And one of the questions, if the community does the pain and we do this all at once, we may want to build that field first so we can, pain will bust people over. So that's part of the conversation, is how do we make all that work and we don't disrupt high school sports as much as possible. So great question. Terrell Park, full build without lights is around 4.2 million. That includes a new parking lot, new exit entrance, and then the fields and storage buildings, and a playground. It also serves as a neighborhood park for that area of Concord, because Manchester Street does not have a neighborhood park, so it does both. And if you want to make a donation, we can start tomorrow, just 4.4 million, we'll be good.
Hi, thanks again. Appreciate the presentation here. And just a message to the city, as a business owner in Concord and raised a family, for my family, this isn't going to benefit them, but to echo the sentiment of this entire group, this needs to be done. Price tag be damned, pain be damned. This is good for Concord, and this is good for these kids coming up, and despite all the inadequacies of the existing infrastructure, we're still pushing out great athletes, and they're performing at high level. And so my message is, let's get it done and let's do it fast, and it should be a priority.
Hi there. Thank you for this presentation tonight. I just wanted to ask, though, like I know it has to be approved by both the city and the school board. Where does it fit in with something like Terrell Park? Like, how would it fit into it all? Would it then go to a citywide vote? Like, or does it just go to the council at that point? Like,
That's probably the multi-million-dollar question.
Yeah.
I think at times they may have to go, the conversation probably goes together, because if we're going to do something here, and depend, is it phase 1, phase 2, the whole thing? It is that question, and I work with Steve all the time, is where are we going to move those teams to? So I don't think it's one or the other. I think it might end up being one or the other, but that's part of the coordination of how do we get what we want here at the same time, not impacting high school sports. Like, the one good thing, and I don't, Terrell Park is not going to solve Memorial Field issues, but it is designed and permitted, Army Corps and everything to go. So if as we go forward in the next year or two, if the decision by the community is something larger here, then it's probably advantageous to try to think where everybody's going. So we could start tomorrow. If you want to make a donation, we'll be good.
So I think it goes with that pain question from before. We've had some discussions about Terrell Park, perhaps at some level, easing our pain, giving us a green space to use during the time where this is not open. We have had conversations around that.
Thank you. Just a historical for hosting events or NHIA events outside of softball and baseball, which they do. Memorial Field used to host the SM&I Boys and Girls State Championship until about 2003, and that went away. because of the field service. So I'm just giving some information about where artificial turf surface would benefit hosting major events. And I think that's where the NHIA has gone since that time.
And if you want to talk about major events, a number of years ago, the New England track and field tournament was run here at Memorial Field. It was the least attended event that you would ever imagine because nobody knew about it, but it was spectacular. Tonight and earlier, you have mentioned a couple times, not lately, but early tonight, about walking areas for people to walk. I think we've also discussed the possibility of, Barbara, close your ears, having a cross-country meet within the confines of Memorial Field so people could actually see the event in its entirety. There you go. Well, we'll have to take care of that. And thirdly, up where the area seems to be unable to define, that little hill from Fruit Street down to it, right in there, no, to the right. Could we possibly put in a sledding area so that the kids don't have to go to White's Park to slide anymore? Where? Or as an alternative to White's Park. Not that they don't want to go to White's anymore, they do. But you could use that as an alternative. I don't know if you spent time thinking about it, but if you might want to put it on your list.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh.
I'm sure you guys thought of this. For that big middle multi-purpose field, will there be floodlights for that surface as well?
The opportunity is there certainly to put sports lights on that field, yes.
And yes, anybody who's gone down to Bedford and they do the multicolored lights and stuff, we'll be doing the same thing. So. Multicolored lights. Any other questions? Thoughts? So on behalf of the city and the school district, I appreciate you all coming. What I'm hearing is continue to move forward with the master planning process. I'm also hearing when we go to City Council and we go to the Concord School District for an update, I would encourage you all to be there again, because ultimately they're the decision makers on how we move forward, and they look at the taxes and everything else. So, you know, we'll publicize that meeting when we get there. Can you go through a couple to the end? Can you go to the end, the slides? So, yep, so this is our next steps. Obviously, everybody got some good feedback. It sounds like we're on the right trail, a couple tweaks. We are gonna fine tune the final cost estimates. We also have to get a cost estimate for the next phase. So the next phase would be design and permitting. Again, that's up to City Council and the school district. Hopefully we do it together, but that's up to them. And then we also have to present to City Council and Concord School to hopefully review and hopeful approval of the plan. Because we need both of those groups to agree on where we want to go. So we'll publicize that as we get going. It's probably a couple months away, but we'll let you all know. Steve will get the message out with the school district. This information is online. It's on the city website. Tonight is being televised. So in a couple days, we'll also have a copy of this online. So please share it with your friends and colleagues and teammates that aren't here, because it is a really important project for the next generation. We need to move forward with it.
Very important to us to move forward with this. You got to show up to those school board meetings. You're going to show up to these city council meetings. I would also encourage anybody to reach out to their representatives, your local representatives, to let them know that this is an important project.
So I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit. This Memorial Field thing has been going on forever. When I first moved back to Concord in 1990 was when we first resurfaced the track, and it was a huge citywide issue. Who's going to pay for it? Who uses the track? All of this reminds me of a story I once heard from a Peace Corps volunteer who was with a group of people that went to a rural community in Africa to bring water to a village, and they were going to dig wells and water and all this, and they got to the village and they're all ready to do their water work, and the head of the group said, no, the first thing we need to do is build a soccer field. And they were befuddled, like, how is a soccer field going to bring water to a village? What the soccer field did was got the whole village together, and as a community, they created water for their community, and you had unity together. We live in a time of so much divisiveness. We disagree about everything. The one place we all have fun is Memorial Field, and that someone spoke to that earlier. I just think as a city, it's in our best interest, all of us, little kids to old people, to have a place that we can go to be healthy, to be outside, to have community with one another. I know my sport experiences were some of the best memories of my life, and a lot of it happened right there at Memorial Field. I coached her there, I coached him there. He coaches there now. So I just think we need to prioritize this as a city, and I had a second grader my first year teaching that told me to make money, you have to spend money. And if we build a beautiful facility here, we can have amazing events, which will bring revenue to our city, which will bring people to our city. I think this needs to be a high priority project. And I say that wearing whatever hat you decide I'm wearing.
Thank you. We'll stick around for questions. If you have questions, again, this is all online. It'll be on the Concord TV in a couple days. So thank you for coming. Have a great night, and we'll see you in the next meeting.